Kick off the holiday season early this year with the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra's performance of Handel's Messiah. Don't miss your chance to experience one of the most performed classical pieces of music worldwide. Make it your new favorite holiday tradition and join the WCO and the Festival Choir of Madison at Bethel Lutheran Church. That's on November 21st at 7 p.m. and November 22nd at 2 p.m. Tickets are available at wcoconcerts.org/Messiah. This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about.
Last week, Dane County passed its 2026 budget. But what's in it for you? I'm CityCast Madison executive producer Haley Sperling, sitting in today for your host Bianca Martin, and joining me to explain what's in the books for next year is Dane County District 6 Supervisor Yogesh Chawla. Yogesh, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Haley, it's a pleasure to be on here. I tune in. I get the newsletter as well. I encourage everyone else to do that. And I'm looking forward to talking about the Dane County budget.
Yeah, I love it. And shout out to Madison Minutes, our newsletter. Well, as you might be aware, then, we have been talking about the city of Madison's budget a lot on this show and in the newsletter recently. But the county's work is often a bit unsung, just kind of in general and in the media. So can you help us put this into perspective for our Madison audience? What type of services does the county fund in Madison?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, we have a $900 million, somewhere in that neighborhood budget, and a lot of the human services are provided by the county. Also, the jail has always been a hot topic issue. That's a county service as well. And we say it's everything from airport to zoo. So there's a variety of services, And you're right, it is in the background. And sometimes as a county board supervisor, people ask me what it's like to be an alder on the city council, and I say, no, I'm on the county board.
Not quite.
And we span the entire county. And so a lot of the times you think about Madison, but we might forget about Verona and Middleton and Marshall and Windsor and Stoughton and all of what the county encompasses.
Yeah, sure. So on that note, how does your work as a Dane County supervisor impact your constituents? Like you said, you're not a Madison alder. We don't necessarily go to you to get a new stop sign at the end of the block. Like, what do you help folks with when they come to you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, especially in my district, is a lot of the people who are housing insecure or homeless, a lot of those services are provided directly here in my district. If you think about organizations like the Beacon, or if you think about, the Salvation Army, the Social Justice Center has been providing a lot of these services as well. So one of the critical things we have to do as a county in partnership with the city is open the Bartillion Homeless Shelter. And that is a purpose-built shelter, and it has 250 beds in it, which is less than our current shelter, which has around 400 beds. So when you think about housing our neighbors, when you think about some of the county services, when you have some of the most acute trauma in your life, whether it's you've been a victim of domestic violence or sexual violence, a lot of those nonprofits who are helping out are funded by the county as well. Rape Crisis Center, Domestic Abuse Intervention Services, or if you're having a mental health issue and the police are called, you might have social workers from Journey Mental Health coming along there as well. So even though we are a little bit in the background, I think a lot of the services that we provide affect people's daily lives.
Yeah. I mean, we've had conversations on the show in the past. I know the county contracts with, the Dane County Humane Society for animal welfare, and then also the Detox Center, Tellurian. That's been in the news recently. So there are pieces that touches everyday lives.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about Tellurian as well as we really dive into the budget.
Yeah, for sure. And, one more question just about the county board, because you brought it up. The county board, as you said, it covers all of Dane County. So we're talking about places outside of Madison, our suburbs, our friends in Sun Prairie and Verona and beyond. So how would you describe the political makeup of the Dane County board? Because, Madison has its city council. It's kind of a homogenous body. But again, Dane County board represents some of the more rural parts of our areas, as well as the metropolitan city. So I have to imagine that there are more viewpoints represented.
Yeah, I would say the Dane County Board is Democratic to progressive. And just a little bit of history, that has not always been the case. We used to have conservative county executives. We used to have conservative majorities on the board. But through the hard work of a lot of Democratic activists, we were able to win seats all throughout Dane County. And after the budget, the hot topic is elections. And we're going to be having those conversations again and trying to maintain a Democratic to progressive majority on the county board. And some of the dynamics of it, I mean, obviously people might know that I'm one of the, I would say, more progressive supervisors. I represent one of the most progressive districts and, wards in the entire state. And if you look at our political makeup here, and if you look at the voter turnout here, I am in the heart of what is very progressive, but also I realize I'm 1 out of 37 votes on the board. So when we're looking to pass a budget, we need to pass a budget that works for all of us, that has to work for the folks in Black Earth and Mazomanie and, Cambridge. So I'm really proud of my colleagues and everyone we worked with to pass what I think is in perilous times with a $31 million structural deficit, a budget that's still as fair as it can possibly be.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into that budget, shall we? Let's get into some of these numbers. Just like the city, the county has an operating budget, which covers more of the day-to-day expenditures like staff and salaries and whatnot. And then also a capital budget, which covers some of the more long-term investments. So buckle up. I'm going to throw a few numbers at you just to give our audience a little primer. Next year's capital budget received a rather large cut. It's a roughly 36% reduction from last year, while the operating budget is $11 million more than last year's budget, but $6 million less than what departments had requested. So
yes,
we know that earlier this year, the county departments were asked to cut their budgets by up to 4%. Why did that come about? Like, what was the need for this slashing? Can you set us up and give us a little bit of context behind this budget season?
Sure. Shared revenue from the state to local municipalities is very, very limited. The state's sitting on a multi-billion-dollar surplus, and they don't want to give it back to the communities that generated that. Dane County is the economic engine of Wisconsin. A lot of that is the city of Madison as well. So if you look at that, the state is starving the municipalities. So when we have the structural deficit, part of that is caused by declining sales tax revenues and increasing costs. If you think about the costs of things like healthcare, inflation, how that has affected everything, our costs are rising, but our revenues are falling, and we're really dependent on that sales tax revenue. So each department was asked to make a 4% cut. Most of the departments did that, but very notably, the sheriff's department did not make a 4% cut. They even, in some cases, realized some revenue that they really shouldn't have. So when we looked at that budget and we saw that all the other departments were collaborating and trying to, follow the county executive's guidance, what we did is initially we proposed cutting 28 positions in the sheriff's department. And I want to explain that because the sheriff's department has a number of open, vacant positions. And these are positions that they've historically been losing more people than they've been hiring. And a lot of that's deputies retiring. I think 1 out of 4 deputies right now is at retirement age, so they could potentially retire. So what we ultimately settled upon was freezing 20 positions in the sheriff's department. And what we did with that money was some very important things. The first thing was human services providers, after they got their 4% cut, got an additional 4% cut. So if you're providing human services on a shoestring as a nonprofit and you get an 8% cut, that's potentially devastating towards your budget. There was other things in there, like we had an immigration affairs social worker position that was cut. And right now, our immigrant communities, they desperately need us, and they desperately need their local governments to help shield them from the excesses and the unconstitutional behavior of the federal government. The other thing that was critical is we have a men's shelter, a homeless shelter that we need to open. Without the county funding that, we would not be able to open that. So when you think about the commitment the county made originally was around $1.5 million, and the county executive's budget only had $500,000 in there. We needed to make up that gap. And even more critical there was when you go from 400 beds to 250 beds on the coldest nights of the year, where are people going to go? We need a bare bones shelter so they don't freeze to death. So if you think of some of these very specific needs we had as a county, we thought it was fair to say, well, the sheriff has 40 open positions. It's very unlikely that they're going to get to hiring, just because traditionally they've been losing more people than they've been hiring. Let's freeze the revenue from 20 of these positions, and we'll use that to fund these critical needs that we have.
Yeah. So how has the sheriff's office responded to that? Because I know a big point of contention for, Dane County Sheriff Calvin Barrett, he said that we are serving these more rural parts of Dane County, who might not have access to larger police departments like the Madison Police Department. So, how has that been received?
Yeah, so, part of that is really interesting because when you think of the rural communities, a lot of them contract directly with the county sheriffs to provide services. And the list just goes on and on. We get that revenue, and that's work that we do for those rural communities. Also, the other thing that's important to emphasize here is the sheriff was unable to hire these positions. So we're not taking one deputy off the street. We're not taking one deputy out of the jail, and we're not taking one deputy out of rural communities. And, the sheriff is a countywide elected position and obviously has to stand up for the sheriff deputies that are there and for their department. But when asked to make a 4% cut, there was definitely ways that the sheriff could have done that. And there was definitely ways that the county executive could have done that. And, as the legislative body, we're sort of the last line of defense there. And, we had to do what we think was right for the community. And that was really borne out by the fact that we had dozens and dozens and dozens of people testifying at the committee meeting, at the public budget hearing, at the Personnel and Finance Committee meeting, at the public hearing after the Personnel and Finance Committee. Me personally, along with my colleagues, we heard, 12, 15, 20 hours of testimony, and we were at meetings some days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And outside of that, we were taking vacation from our day jobs to be on the phone, to talk to colleagues, to talk to media. And we don't have staff. We don't have press secretaries. We basically, you just grab another coffee and you just hit it hard and hope you don't make any mistakes. And as a board, the decision was really in our hands, and we could have just passed the budget as is, but we said we're really going to, especially in these perilous times, to take a stand for the most vulnerable members of our community.
Imagine what it would be like to not be able to afford to put a meal on your table this Thanksgiving. Too many of our neighbors don't have to imagine. That's their reality. With rising food prices and cuts to food aid programs, food insecurity is a crisis in Madison. That's why Goodman Community Center runs the annual Thanksgiving Basket Drive. They're giving 4,000 families in our community all the groceries they need to cook a delicious Thanksgiving dinner at home. Everything from gravy, veggies, stuffing, dessert, and of course, the turkey. But they need our help to collect all the food and funds needed to fill all of those 4,000 baskets. If you can afford to do so, go to goodmancenter.org/Thanksgiving and learn how you can help. You can donate food, start a food drive, or donate funds. Together, we can ensure that thousands of our friends and neighbors have a joyful Thanksgiving. Are you going to the finest young professionals party of the year? Madison Magnet is Dane County's premier young professionals organization, and they aim to give members a place to connect, collaborate, and develop. And their big annual event is just around the corner. The Magnet Fete is a night of fun and philanthropy with other young professionals in the Madison area. It will feature a wine bowl and a raffle with prizes, including show tickets, gift cards, and other great items. This year's fete benefits Second Harvest Food Bank of Southern Wisconsin. Tickets are on sale now. Tickets start at $75. You do not want to miss this fun and fabulous night. The event will also be the full unveiling and celebration of Magnet's merger with the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce, where you can learn more about what that all entails for them as an organization and you as a member. Get tickets today at madisonmagnet.org/magnetfed.
You guys are working hard for the people. Again, appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today, taking quote unquote vacation from your outside job to do this work.
The budget is passed this big, like you've gotten the big rock up the hill. And what's interesting, and what's going to be difficult, and just to be realistic with everyone, is next year, we still have this structural deficit. And a lot of the easy things to do, cut a lot of positions that didn't have people in them. We're going to have tougher decisions to make next year. So the important work, I should say, never stops. And, we're really looking forward to collaborating with the county executive, with the sheriff, with the county clerk, with all of the constitutional officers and all of the wonderful staff in Dane County to really work together to figure this out.
Yeah. And, mentioning that deficit, I wanted to note that, the county is looking at a roughly $31 million budgetary shortfall in 2027. So as you said, next year is going to be critical when it comes to balancing this budget. So can you help me understand, how did we get here? Is it just inflation and not keeping up with expenditures, or is there something else that we're not seeing?
I think a lot of it was, so you had the ARPA money, the Recovery Act money. And that really, there was a lot of money that was pumped into local communities. And if you think of a lot of the work we kind of did with that, we put a lot of homeless people in housing, and that was hotel housing. There was a lot of maybe additional people who were hired there. There was some of that recovery money was used to give an 8% cost of living adjustment to county staff. We have invested a lot, as you said, in our capital budget. If you think of the land and water budget, the one I oversee, that capital budget used to be $8 million to do things like land purchases and make sure that we can drain water from our rivers so things don't flood. But when you use that capital money to buy physical things or pieces of land, you need staff to really, throughout the county to do a lot of the rich services that we provide. And we're so dependent on sales tax revenue here. And during the pandemic, people were shopping. People were buying things for their house. They were remodeling their house. There was a lot of money being spent then. So now with the pullback in spending, and particularly with things like the big rise in healthcare costs, you just have this real situation where our economy's really in a rough place for everyday people who are working, everyday people who are out there living. I mean, it's great for the billionaires, the people who are getting $1 trillion salary package. I'm sure they're having a great time and they're getting tax cuts. But when you think about all this pressure that's coming to the local communities, and, it's particularly disappointing, the state is sitting on billions of dollars. And the Republicans in the state will not release that money until they have power and until they can do something with it. So they're really starving the communities that are generating that money. And, it's up to us to be creative as, part-time Dane County Board supervisors to say, how can we make sure we support our most vulnerable communities? How do we not impact public safety? How do we make sure we still invest in our wonderful Dane County staff? And how do we do this when trying to figure out how to do things like afford health insurance cost rises? So I think we did a good job clearing the first hurdle, and now we have some experience in how to deal with deficits. And, it didn't used to be like this, to be honest with you. Budgets were a glorious time to invest in great projects that helped people, and it was a time to be happy and prosperous. But this kind of reminds us of the Great Recession in the late 2000s, where we're going to have to make really hard decisions. And the best way to make those decisions is with all the people who are impacted at the table.
Yeah. And you mentioned the state's surplus. I did want to note, yeah, the state of Wisconsin is sitting at a roughly $4.3 billion surplus this year. So there is money out there. It's just a matter of how will it be distributed. And the Republicans in the state legislature have some ideas on that, but we won't dissect that in this podcast. We're sticking at the county. But, you're talking about the county trying to stick up for some of our area's most vulnerable communities. And with that, I did want to dig into a little bit more into the Dane County's Human Services Department and the contentions over funding there. So ultimately, how are you feeling about the funding that the Human Services Department has received? Is there enough to cover the needs of our very rapidly growing county?
Yeah, and that's a tough question because when I thought about the budget, I kind of thought about it one way. Like I was like, we made these amendments to restore money, right? But what we did is we restored 3% of a 4% additional cut. So when you think about our human services providers, initially they received a 4% cut and they were reckoning with, hey, how do we deal with this? We were unable to restore any of that funding. We gave them an additional 1% cut. So we made it less bad for them. So they're taking a 5% cut instead of an 8% cut, which is good. And if you look at the totality of everything, but they're going to be asked to deliver more services with less money. And the other thing that's challenging here too is due to some administrative rule, it used to be if you were a human services provider, you would get 12 equal payments throughout the year. If you're a small nonprofit, if you know you have that steady revenue coming in, you're like, okay, I can budget accordingly. Now you have to get reimbursed for expenses. So you might incur expenses, and that might be over a 4 to 6 week period. Then you have to ask for that money to come back. So you're going to have to figure out not only has my budget been cut, but how do I float payroll maybe? So we're trying to figure out how can we help with cash flow. And, that's something I think we're going to have to deal with going forward. And also, if you think about this budget, sure, we did provide quite a bit more for the Bartolon men's shelter, but there's still a friends group who has to do probably close to $500,000 worth of fundraising. And we also have to think like, how can we make this shelter open 24/7? What is the criteria for people to get into this shelter? There's going to be some different screenings around that. And us as a county, we really have to ensure that we're providing access to these facilities for, folks who might not be able to navigate a system. So I think you're right to say that there is a lot of pressure on human services providers and on human services in general. And that is also not even taking into account whatever the federal government is going to do to make that more challenging.
One more beat on this budget. I did want to note that this is County Executive Melissa Agard's first budget season as county executive. And we're actually going to have her on the show coming up pretty soon. And so keep that in mind with how you answer this question or not. But I'm curious about, her involvement and how you saw her as a partner and a leader and an advocate in this space. Are you encouraged by what you saw? Was she someone that was looking to help bolster collaboration? What was it like bringing her into this process?
Yeah, I would definitely say that the county board and the county executive had pretty sharp disagreements over this budget. What we do is we receive a budget and we amend it as we think is best for the community. I would definitely say the county executive did not agree with the adjustments that we made. And I think that's a relationship that's going to have to be worked on, just like any relationship out there. You might get a different story from the county executive about what she thinks about the county board changes, but I think it's also very important in moments like this to offer everyone some grace, and in this budget process, like some of this stuff, it wears on you. Like I was called unethical in this budget process for suggesting that the sheriff should do his part and do a 4% revenue reduction like every other department. And I don't think that kind of stuff is fair. I think if we're going to solve hard problems together, we have to respect each other as elected officials who have worked hard to earn that position. And I think collaboration and understanding and also giving people some grace is key. All of us want what's best for Dane County. And I know the board supervisors, I mean, we're not working basically a second part-time job that's, you get some money for it, like $12,000 a year, but it doesn't really add up to the amount of time you put into it. We're doing this because we're seeing our communities just erode. We're seeing division, erosion, and we're really seeing, like, for me as an immigrant, we're seeing like the dissolution of the American dream. We're seeing, the shining beacon we came to, a country we wanted to invest all of our time and heart and love and energy into. Really, we're seeing all that effort we put in to see society taking a step back and declining. And I think one of the most important things for us to do is to say, how can we solve problems here in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our counties, and in our states? And can we do that enough as individuals so we have collective solutions for our entire country? And I think that's really our motivation. So, I mean, you are going to hear probably some finger pointing, probably some disagreements, but I want those disagreements to be policy disagreements, not personality disagreements. We have to come from the place where in Dane County, I'd say, look at our election results. 80 to 85% of us all agree on certain things and principles, and the folks who don't disagree with us, they're part of our community as well, just as much as we are, even though they have different viewpoints. So I think particularly next year when the easier solutions are off the table and we might have to be looking at, are people going to lose their jobs? We really have to come at that from a position of compassion and empathy and love and trust. And I think getting a little bit of time away from the budget is going to all put us in a position to do that.
Yeah. It's looking at the humanity of it all, right? Dollars and cents is one thing, but there are people and jobs and lives behind all of this. So, Yogesh, thank you so much for breaking this all down for us and for coming back on CityCast Madison and explaining the important work that the county is doing. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, it's been great to be here. And I think CityCast provides like a really valuable service. Like when we talk about institutions eroding, like local journalism is eroding as well. There aren't super big in-depth diving into the county budget, and the spaces we can do it are CityCast Madison. So thank you guys for what you're doing over there. I really appreciate it.
That's Dane County District 6 Supervisor Yogesh Chawla. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm executive producer Haley Sperling, in for your host Bianca Martin. Don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode with someone who cares about dollars and cents? I'm talking money, y'all. Help spread the word about CityCast Madison. Alrighty, we will be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care and thanks for listening.